In just a few days, a single trade decision in Washington could vaporize over 100,000 jobs in one African country. And that's just the start. A new wave of American tariffs is set to hit countries across Africa on August 7th. And the official line is that this is about balancing the books and putting America first. But while the headlines are all talking about trade, the real story here has very little to do with economics. This is a calculated political move, one that's threatening to blow up 25 years of U.S.-Africa relations. This isn't your average trade spat. That would be like a minor squabble over a dinner bill. This is like one partner suddenly tearing up the lease on a home they've shared for a quarter century. The aftershocks could change the global balance of power. So, what is the real reason the Trump administration is targeting these African nations? Section 1. The end of an era. Gutting AGOA. To get what's happening now, you first have to understand what's being torn down. For a quarter of a century, the heart of U.S. trade policy in Africa was one law, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA. Since 2000, AGOA gave eligible African countries duty-free access to the U.S. market. Think of AGOA as a sturdy bridge, built specifically to connect African businesses to the American economy. It was a partnership designed to fuel growth. Well, that era is over. The new tariffs have effectively killed AGOA before its official expiration date in September 2025. In its place, a new, aggressive regime. A flat 15% tariff now applies to most African nations, but for some, it's much worse. These tariffs aren't just adding a toll to the bridge, they're planting dynamite on its support pillars. Take South Africa, the continent's industrial powerhouse. It's been slammed with a staggering 30% tariff. The news sent shockwaves through its economy, forcing the central bank to slash its growth forecast. The country's auto and agriculture sectors, which export billions to the U.S., are now facing an existential crisis. But maybe the most telling example is the small, landlocked nation of Lesotho. The new 15% tariff is a disaster. Lesotho's economy is like a vehicle running on one single fuel source, its textile industry, which makes clothes for U.S. brands. This new cost threatens to make its factories uncompetitive. The fear is that U.S. importers will simply move on, leading to factory shutdowns and mass layoffs. This isn't a tweak to trade policy. It's a demolition. The real question is why. Section 2. The official story versus the political reality. Publicly, the Trump administration says these tariffs are a core part of its America First agenda. The goal, they claim, is to shrink the U.S. trade deficit and demand reciprocity, arguing that African nations have enjoyed a one-way street for too long. But that economic argument starts to look pretty thin on closer inspection, like building a skyscraper on a foundation of sand. South Africa's government, for example, has pointed out that the vast majority of U.S. goods already enter the country with zero tariffs. Economists have called the formula used to calculate the tariffs illogical because it disproportionately punishes smaller economies. This suggests the real motive isn't about balancing a spreadsheet. There's a deeper political game being played. The tariffs look less like an economic tool and more like a political weapon. Let's go back to South Africa. That 30% tariff didn't just come out of nowhere. It landed after rising friction between Pretoria and Washington over South Africa's membership in the BRICS economic bloc, a group seen as a challenger to American influence. In that light, the tariffs look less like trade policy and more like a tool of coercion. The case of Lesotho is just as revealing. Hitting one of Africa's poorest nations with a crippling tariff makes zero sense if your goal is to reduce the U.S. trade deficit. It's like using a cannon to hunt a mouse. The oversized impact on Lesotho is the real message. It sent a chilling signal to the rest of the continent. The old rules are out. Economic vulnerability is now a weakness to be exploited for political gain. Section 3. The backlash and Africa's strategic pivot. The reaction across Africa was shock, then a scramble to act. Governments sent emergency delegations to Washington, desperate to negotiate. South African ministers and business leaders spent months in a full-court press, even offering a $3.3 billion investment package. They were met with silence. This American turn away from diplomacy has had an unexpected side effect. Instead of breaking the continent apart, the U.S. move has acted like an outside threat, forcing a scattered village to build walls and work together for the first time. The tariffs have lit a fire under the African Continental Free Trade Area, the AfCFTA, the massive project to create a single market. Leaders are now saying that intra-African trade is the only real shield against the volatility of outside partners. And the response isn't just regional. At the World Trade Organization, a coalition of African nations is preparing to challenge the tariffs. This is a strategic shift. For years, African countries often dealt with the U.S. one-on-one, like small boats navigating next to an aircraft carrier. Now, they see a unified fleet as the only way to negotiate with superpowers. The U.S. was once seen as a stable partner. Now, it's viewed as unpredictable. The AGOA framework has been shattered, forcing African leaders to hedge their bets and find new partners. This isn't just talk, it's a fundamental repositioning.
Section 4. The Geopolitical Chessboard, Creating a Vacuum for China. This move isn't happening in a bubble. It's playing out on a global chessboard, and by picking this fight, the U.S. risks creating a massive strategic vacuum in Africa, a vacuum that its biggest rival, China, is perfectly positioned to fill. For years, China has been Africa's largest trading partner. While the U.S. is putting up trade walls, China is lowering them. It's as if the U.S. has decided to abandon a valuable garden it spent decades cultivating. Now, China, the patient neighbor, is ready to walk right in and harvest the fruits. Washington is talking about deficits. Beijing is talking about mutual development. These U.S. tariffs might just be the biggest gift to Chinese foreign policy in Africa. The European Union, Africa's second-largest trading partner, has also slammed the U.S. move, calling it a destabilizing force. With America stepping back, other powers are likely to increase their engagement. This is about more than losing market share. It's about the slow-motion erosion of American influence. Africa has some of the world's fastest-growing economies, a massive youth population, and critical minerals that will power the 21st century. For decades, programs like AGOA were key tools of American soft power. Now, that strategy is being thrown into reverse. This approach, punishing with trade while also looking to reduce aid, is seen by many African leaders as a sign of deep disrespect. The strategic consequence is crystal clear. By treating African nations not as partners but as pawns, the U.S. risks alienating an entire continent. The tariffs might play well for a short-term political agenda at home, but the long-term cost could be the voluntary surrender of American influence in one of the most vital regions of the 21st century. This story is developing fast, and the fallout from these tariffs will be felt for years. To stay ahead of the curve on the forces shaping our world, make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell. So, what do you think? Is this a brilliant America First strategy or a catastrophic blunder that will haunt the U.S. for decades? Let us know in the comments. Section 5. The Human Cost. From Presidential Decrees to Empty Factories. Beyond the geopolitics, there is a devastating human cost. A policy decision in Washington is like flipping a circuit breaker that shuts off the lights in a factory thousands of miles away. Let's go back to Lesotho. The textile industry employs tens of thousands of people, mostly women and primary breadwinners. One factory, TSIC, employed 1,300 people making sportswear for American stores. The threat of tariffs alone caused orders to dry up. The factory floor went quiet, and 1,300 people were sent home, their livelihoods gone overnight. The same story threatens to play out in South Africa. Its successful auto industry employs around 500,000 people and now faces the 30% tariff. The citrus industry fears up to 35,000 jobs could be lost. These aren't just statistics. They're families who could lose their homes and communities facing economic ruin in a country already struggling with 32% unemployment. Development agencies warn that this economic shock could trigger wider instability. One expert warned that if the textile industry dies, Lesotho will be dead. It's like pulling a single critical thread that causes the entire tapestry of a nation's economy to unravel. That's the real-world impact of a political decision pushing countless people into poverty. The new wave of U.S. tariffs on African nations is not a simple trade dispute. The official explanation, that it's about fixing trade imbalances, simply doesn't hold up. The real reason is a calculated political maneuver. It's the weaponization of economic policy to serve a domestic agenda and settle political scores. It marks the end of a 25-year consensus on U.S.-Africa relations, swapping a policy of partnership for one of brute force politics. It's like replacing a handshake with a clenched fist. The decision has sparked a continent-wide backlash, pushing African nations to fast-track their own integration and search for more reliable partners. It also risks creating a strategic vacuum that competitors, especially China, are eager to fill, which could permanently weaken American influence.
The immediate damage will be economic, measured in lost jobs from Lesotho to South Africa. But the long-term consequences are geopolitical. The world is watching to see if this gamble pays off, or if this will be remembered as the moment the United States chose to walk away from its leadership role on one of the world's most dynamic continents.